this is going to sound like a complete 180 because 2 months ago I made a video revisiting the Ben Simmons and James Harden trade that happened last year, but just gonna flat out say it, with all the reports of Harden and being linked to making a return to Houston, and those reports have been going on since Christmas, and then Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer dropped a reported piece yesterday citing multiple sources about Harden's return to Houston. And if you read it, there's just stuff in there where it's like, wow, he might be really gone. Now, I still don't buy that line in the article where Harden is using the Rockets as leverage to get more money out of the Sixers, because honestly, like, the difference between the max that the Sixers can offer versus any other team is like $9 million. Not sure how much $9 million makes a difference if you're trying to get the maximum possible money out of the Sixers, but whatever. There was stuff in there like, before they hired Ime Udoka, the Rockets were asking coaching candidates how they would feel coaching Harden, and there was other things where obviously it makes sense because Harden built his legacy in Houston, but he's treated like a god in Houston, and Houston is a great city. That would be a great place to be revered in. So I don't doubt that, where there's smoke, there's fire. And, I'm honestly leading like 75-25, maybe 70-30 that Harden is going to Houston versus returning to Philadelphia. But the Sixers should let Harden walk if that's the case. And that's not to say that my views on the Ben Simmons-James Harden trade have changed. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to change my stance on that. It was a good trade. It was a good trade at the time, especially unloading off of Ben Simmons and giving, Joel Embiid a proper running mate to at least try to make an honest run at the thing. And the Sixers were up 2 with 5 minutes left in Game 6 on their home court, and then obviously they choked it away. So I would still classify it as a successful trade, but given what has happened, given that I think this series revealed a lot of things about, I wouldn't say the basketball partnership itself between James and Joel Embiid, but it did highlight, the personalities of the stars and how too similar they are in terms of how they react when adversity hits. With Harden, it seems like it's an extreme worse version where he just decides he doesn't want any part of trying to fight back. He'll give the ball up quickly, then he'll say shit like at the end of last year's series against the Heat where he says, the ball didn't find me. You're James fucking Harden. The ball, you should be able to command the ball. But anyway, Harden did win 2 games for the Sixers in that Celtics series, and look, the series is squarely on Joel Embiid's shoulders, even with the knee injury. But given everything that I said right there, and the fact that Harden and Kyle Neubeck of Philly Voice pointed this out in his piece about, whether the Sixers should let Harden walk or not. Harden has a very warped sense of what sacrifice means, because that was the word that was thrown around and law was made about how James had to change his style to, help for the betterment of the team. And then when he was asked after Game 7, were those sacrifices worth it? He obviously said, obviously no, because they didn't win a championship. I think Harden has a very warped sense of what sacrifice means, because sacrifice doesn't mean, capitulating your game and then trying it out and seeing how it works. It's willingly giving yourself up to do it. And while he did make sacrifices, I think he had the wrong mindset of how to sacrifice, and basically like, well, I'm going to try this out for a year and see how it goes. It's not how it works. And given that he has been linked to Houston when he has said repeatedly that the championship was the last thing on his resume he wanted to get, I'm really not so sure. Basically, I'm not sure, one, about the duo long term and how they can win a championship, especially when we saw how they reacted when adversity hit. And 2, it's just too much money to lock in. I know for like the next 2 years, probably the Sixers would win a lot of games, but we know what the result will be. And James's type of style, because it's clear, as you know, in the Keith Pompey article, that Harden also wants the luxuries of being treated like a star and doing whatever he wants, basically. And frankly, he hasn't shown enough in Philadelphia to even warrant that type of treatment. So I think the Sixers should let Harden walk. I understand that it's going to be difficult team building around Harden. And look, I'm not saying I wouldn't be fine with the Sixers bringing Harden back, but a 4-year deal scares the shit out of me. This isn't like Jimmy Butler when they had Jimmy Butler 5 years ago, and the prospects of a 4-year deal going into Jimmy's 30s scared the shit out of the Sixers. This is 33-year-old James Harden, who has shown a decline in terms of being able to finish at the rim. If his step back isn't going, he is pretty much 80% less effective. And the fact that he just has the step back and you can't really post him up, you can't run him off screens, your offense is really limited when James Harden is your lead primary ball handler, especially an aging James Harden. It might have worked in his prime. Houston went to 2 conference finals and ran into the best team of all time in one of those conference finals, but just the play style is just not conducive. I would rather take my chances on, letting James walk. You renounce a few free agents like George Niang or something like that, and then you tried to unload Tobias's expiring $39 million deal and try to just retool, and no, you're not going to be as good. Your ceiling probably won't be as high, but honestly, with the way this season played out, I don't know how anyone can be so sure that scenario B is going to be appreciatively worse than when the Sixers had James Harden, because we've seen a lot of parity, we've seen players make jumps out of nowhere, and I do honestly think that a coaching change was needed, and Doc Rivers had to go. Don't think he should have been fired for this particular playoff run. He should have been fired immediately after the Hawks series, but that's neither here nor there. I think somebody like a Nick Nurse or a Mike D'Antoni or somebody that could pull the best out of every individual guy on the roster, trust young players to make mistakes, which is something that Doc did not do, and that's one of the reasons we lost, steal of contracts like Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe could have played in the Sixers-Celtics series and stuff like that. I think I would rather just take my chances rolling with Maxey as the lead primary ball handler. Let's see how good he gets. No one thought Tyrese Maxey would be this good anyway going into his draft year in 2020. He became an elite shooter super fast and became a 20-point scorer super fast, and he showed in the Boston series that while he did struggle, that's a team he struggles against, he was not afraid of the moment. He still took shots with no conscience, and that's the type of player that I would go into a theoretical foxhole with when it comes to the playoffs. And I think James walking would give Maxey the opportunity to see how good he could really be, and with some pieces coming back and a Tobias Harris expiring, and then you free yourself up for maybe free agency in 2024. You might have to take a step back because, Joel Embiid is going to be 30 in March next year, but you never know. Joel Embiid did carry the Sixers to a lot of wins last year before Harden got there, while his second best player at the time, Ben Simmons, decided to quit, and Embiid had to put a lot on his shoulders. And like I mentioned earlier, just the personality between Embiid and Harden, they're just too similar of players. I think Embiid needs somebody like a Jimmy Butler, like the famous video in that Raptor series back in 2019. Butler pulled the best out of Joe, and Joe needs that type of personality. He responds to tough criticism. I think he thrives in it, and whenever a player challenges him, that's when he gets the best brought out of him, and I don't think James is necessarily the co-star to do that. They're just too similar. So I would rather try to angle for players that will bring the best out of Embiid, or like last year, basically challenge Embiid to carry the load, and he'll do it. Like, does rise to the challenge in some respects, and in some respects, like Game 7, he just fucking did not try for whatever reason. But I think just in terms of just offing yourself off of somebody like Harden, who will disappear in 4 or 5 of the games. Well, 4 of the games, because Game 5, that was the James Harden the Sixers needed. Just that B+, floor general, score a bit, rebound a bit, get everybody involved. That was the best version of James Harden for the Sixers. There's just, the offense is just too predictable, too stale, and Harden as the lead ball handler does limit your options, especially when he doesn't have the step back going, and he's not really a good post-up player or can play make from the post or anything like that. So that's my opinion. Again, I would be fine if they brought Harden back on like a 1+1 or a 2+1, but if it's between Houston and the Sixers and Harden is using the Rockets to leverage more money out of the Sixers, or if he is seriously considering going to the Rockets outright and going back to his place of comfort, he has officially, forfeited his quest to get a ring. If that's the case, the Sixers should just let him walk and figure it out from there.